All right, fun stuff. I'm looking up in the top left screen. I'm seeing that we are now live, 29 seconds in. Good afternoon. Happy Sunday and welcome. My name is Trey Haddon. I'm the pastor here at Second Pres. And today I'm here with a panel discussion on COVID next steps. Now, we've all heard a lot about COVID of the past. We've heard about COVID of the present. And here we're talking about COVID, hopefully, of the future, whatever that could look like. But knowing we have a very limited time, I'm going to go ahead and have us dive right in. But I would be wrong not to have each one of our panelists introduce who they are. So, like I said, my name is Trey Haddon. I'm the pastor of Second Pres. Barb, if we could start with you.
Yes, I'm Barbara Nathan, and I'm the CEO of Westminster Village.
Thank you, ma'am. And Sherri?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sherri Thomas. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources for District 87.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. And Dr. Nevin?
Yeah, I'm Dr. James Nevin, and I am the Vice President and Chief Medical Officer for Carle, BroMenn, and Eureka. And for all those attending, hopefully you're recording the Bears-Packers game. Thanks for attending.
That was actually a really big moment when we realized that we were going to have a time conflict. We were worried about that. But being from the South, I understand all too well. So diving right in, friends, as we come here today together, I want us to start off with, we've now been dealing with this for over a year and a half. COVID. How are we doing? Anybody can start.
Well, I think we're doing very well. You know, the resilience of everybody. I'll stop.
Just going to say we're better than we were. That is for sure. Vaccinations have made a huge, huge difference, as have people's behaviors, wearing our masks, keeping a distance, looking out for each other. I think we're doing much, much better.
Thank you for sharing that, Barb. Jim, did you have something to say?
Barb and I could have been talking at the same time. I mean, we were saying the same thing. And I'm pleased. I think there's been great resilience. I look at McLean County and our positivity rate below 3, whereas surrounding communities have a positivity rate of 8, 9, 10. And I think that shows exactly what Barb is saying, is that, we have heeded wearing masks, watching our space, and getting vaccination, though there is some room for vaccination. Those over 65, we're 90% vaccinated. So that shows a lot of wisdom and belief and trust.
I would definitely agree. We are on the mend and making great strides in terms of our students and staff at District 87. I think, last year there was a lot of apprehension just with everything, associated with COVID. This was new, in terms of our side as the educators. No one ever thought we would ever have to figure out how do we successfully educate our students.
Oh, we're having technical difficulties.
And so now, from a stage where there was a lot of apprehension, there was definitely just much more excitement at the start of this year, and looking forward to things being what is more normally associated with school. And so, yeah, we're doing well. We are doing well.
That's really good to hear, because I feel like there's so much in our society right now that would say otherwise. So it's really good to hear y'all. All three of y'all represent a very different walk of life here in this panel. That's why we asked y'all all to be here. But I think that's just great for us to hear today. So moving forward, let's dive in. I'm curious, Barb, you work with a very specific set of the public side of things. Anyway, a very specific age group. I'm sorry, I'm blinking on my words. And I'm wondering how with the people that you're working with, how are they going through on a mental health and a spiritual health need? How is that being taken care of, or is it? What does that look like?
It has been quite a journey for those that are older, regardless if you are living in your home, and that may have been even more difficult, or living in a place like Westminster where you're part of a community. It has been a very rough journey for individuals. There's been isolation associated with this for almost every single person. In the areas that are licensed, our long-term care and our assisted living, I mean, literally, they were separated from loved ones for months upon months upon months. It's not a population that's used to seeing a church service, watching their church services on television. For a period of time, even spiritual leaders weren't connecting, except for virtually. So it's been a very rough time for individuals. The team members that work in long-term care deserve all of our praise, because they were everything to people as we went through this. They did everything from, of course, as always, providing meals to doing people's laundry to setting up virtual visits, but it's not been the same. And the ramifications of that are really pretty extreme when we look at the physical reaction to issues of isolation and the absence of spiritual care.
Mm. Yeah. Had there been any adjustments, modifications, anything like that?
Oh, I mean, it has changed dramatically. We are back open. Here at Westminster, we've not had a case of COVID in, oh boy, 6 months, more than that, 7, 8 months. And so those connections are back. I think, Trey, you were even here doing services last week or the week before, which we so appreciate. And we're at a time of healing, because it is helping people reconcile what has been going on. And that's for the team members as well. And I'm sure Dr. Nevin's feeling this with the team at the hospital. We want for them to be able to heal here soon and be done with this. We've been able to get done with it a little bit quicker than they have.
Thank you so much. Sherri, there at District 87, very different clientele, obviously, kind of looking from one extreme to the other, but wondering, what does that look like on your side point? Education has changed so drastically. What does that
my
look
gosh, so drastically. I mean, very similar to what, Barb has shared. We have our students who, and even our staff, we're struggling with that isolation piece. So much of school is social. And, my background prior to working at the district office, for 23 years, I was at the junior high school, and you will not find a group of more social students than junior high students. I mean, that is truly the lifeblood for them. And so, with initially everything COVID just taking away those opportunities for socialization and having to experience that isolation was so incredibly different, for them. I mean, kids just wanted to be, in school with their friends, doing the things that kids do, doing all the things, that they love about school and all of the activities associated with it. And so, it's really nice to be back together. But then, what we're finding as a result of that isolation is really having to get back to some of those social skills and different things that were just innate that kids had. You took that away for an extended period of time. And so it's just, back to basics is what I've referred to, and just relearning a lot of that again. And, for some students, relearning. For some students, it's reactivating those skills that you were already taught and you just didn't have to use for a while because we were in this time period. But definitely, one of the things that has come from COVID, connecting with a lot of families because of the technology that we are able to provide our students and families in District 87. And so while there are certainly plenty of negatives, there were some positives to come from that, because that technology piece is huge. And, just the Zoom platform, being able to connect with our families in a way that we just hadn't previously done because we didn't have to. And so, that's expanded the school's reach tremendously. And so there are things like Zoom parent-teacher conferences that will always continue for us. And it's not something we maybe necessarily would have gone to were it not for COVID. So lots of changes on the education horizon for sure.
No, I'd say the same for this population in terms of it was not a world that did Zoom or virtual visits, and now families are connecting.
Yeah.
That ones that aren't here can connect with their loved ones. You can see the grandchild, you can see the great grandchild.
Yes.
I mean, it really has been one of the blessings that's come out of this that will stay with us.
Yeah, those are, we, even in my world here at the church, we've definitely been affected by COVID and being able to do a lot of studies, doing other things online, connecting with people, multiple states, multiple times. It's been great. I'm wondering, Sherri, I think one of the harder questions, socially, students definitely have had to adapt to a lot, to say the least. But I think right now a lot of people are wondering, what about the education gap? There already was an education gap, and now we see this nice 1.5 2 year period where students are literally not in the classroom. How has that been affected? But a bigger question, what are y'all doing to kind of help students and foster students to get back on track?
Fortunately, with District 87, prior to even COVID, we had worked with Frontier and, now have expanded that to just do hotspots. But that technology piece, we didn't want that to be a barrier for learning. And so all of our families who qualified for free and reduced learning were given internet access within their homes. I mean, that was provided at no charge to them. And that was through the partnership that District 87 had with Frontier. And, District 87 was definitely a trendsetter in that sense. Other districts were not doing that. They just weren't able to. But for us, it was all about, we are providing laptops and resources to our students. And so we need to make sure they had those internet connections within the home. That could not be a barrier. That was just something we were not willing to accept. And again, we were doing that prior to COVID. And so that was really nice that resource was available. And so it wasn't something where, students and families couldn't connect because they didn't have that. Oh, they had it. And we made sure that they had it in their homes. And so it's just, I feel very fortunate to be a part of a district, who was forward thinking in that sense to be able to provide that to our families. So, and it took a lot of work, a lot of effort, building administrators, social workers, even the bus company that we work with delivering laptops to students' homes. That was something we were going to make sure that if you needed it, District 87 was going to get it to you. We were going to figure out a way.
That's awesome. Absolutely. Dr. Nevin, glad to have you here with us. I saw you going kind of in and out, but see you very clear now. So that's wonderful. Wondering, there's a lot of questions in the air around COVID when it comes to masks, when it comes to vaccines specifically talking about pregnancy and children. What will booster shots look like? Will the vaccines ever go away? I'm wondering if you have any words of insight to any of that and more.
Oh, I could talk the rest of the time. Vaccines, I think, are the most important single thing that we can do. And it has just been a blessing from God, I believe, that, we have been able to put science together and come up with such an effective vaccine program. As you know, all vaccines basically require a booster or several shots, except for, I think, smallpox. And kids get something like 16 different vaccinations when they're very young. The vaccinations for kids has gone through a rigorous testing that's very, very appropriate and responsible, because kids are growing, they are metabolizing, they are developing. And they've found that, because of that hyped up engine of growth and stimulation, that they can use a much smaller dose to gain even better protection than we older folks get, because we've done most of our growing as such and developing. So I'm very excited for it. I think that it's a game changer. And, as far as pregnancy, the American College of Obstetrician and Gynecology has said it is safe. You should do it. The pediatrics and neonatology, academies have all said, please get vaccinated. What we have found is those young women that have elected not to get vaccinated and get pregnant have close to a 13% greater mortality, and that's for them and for their newborn. And so that is a risk that I think is just huge. And, I would, if my wife were younger and I were younger and we wanted to have kids, I absolutely would say, let's get vaccinated and let's protect you. Let's protect our newborn going forward. And, when you look at it, I'll finish up with one last thing. There's been over 6 billion vaccinations given in the world. There's been over 450 million vaccination shots given in the United States. I say that because as a scientist, those numbers are large enough that if something bad were going to happen because of a vaccination, it would show up. The results of getting COVID are 10 to 100 times greater risk to the person and for their future, with heart disease, kidney disease, neurologic fogging. Once you get COVID, that it's a no-brainer to me that vaccinations make sense and that we've been blessed with the scientific community that we have. Thank you.
Can you speak to any of the misconceptions? There's a lot of, one of the reasons we're having this panel discussion right now is because there's a lot of misinformation. Can you speak to any of the misinformation that you've heard of recent, of months, in anything that might be able to clear up some of that?
Well, I think that first is perspective. If you have high blood pressure, if you have gallbladder disease, if you've got pneumonia, who do you go to get treated? Who do you trust? It's not Dr. Google. It's not Dr. Facetube. It's your family doctor. It's the scientists that are out there giving good information. You don't have this, bizarre ivermectin and ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and people saying, well, look what it's done. The scientific data does not support it, period. And when you look at those few and far between doctors that have come out and said, oh, look what we've done, their information breaks down immediately under scientific scrutiny. And for some reason, people are wanting to, not believe the mass collective wisdom and choose to look at social media or politicians for their scientific knowledge. But when they have high cholesterol, I hope that they get their directions from their doctor going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Nevin. Appreciate those profound words of wisdom and boldness to them. Sherri, wanting to kind of come back to children, as vaccines get distributed throughout our population, I'm wondering, is there any understandings of what masking could look like in the public school systems in the future?
I don't necessarily see masking going away.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about, and certainly Dr. Nevin, I'm sure, can speak to this, but just in terms of illness and even associated with our flu numbers, and things that went down as a result of masking, I don't know that it's something that would or even should go away. Certainly, I think of it as a minor inconvenience for the greater good. No one likes it, of course, and would love to be without, but if it's something overall that's going to help us as a community, as a school district, why would we go away from it? And so it's certainly something I could see continuing, even longer periods of time than we initially thought. I mean, I think about, even when, COVID first started and school shut down in March of 2020, none of us ever thought, I mean, and myself included, it was like, oh, this will, maybe be for a couple of weeks sort of thing. I mean, none of us ever thought we would be in the state where we are now, but ultimately as educators, we want to be in school with our kids. And so if that means wearing a mask, then we're going to put on the masks because we want to be in the schools with our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And I want to go up to Barb and say kind of a similar question. A lot of things and procedures have changed with the demographic that you're working with. Do you see that remaining the same? Do you see a change in that? What does that look like?
I think we've had lots of changes and we'll have lots of changes out of this. Masking is something that I don't know what the future is. I do expect that it will, during times of flu outbreak, I think we'll be back in mass on a regular basis. It's very difficult for me to see this places where masking is not being followed. There's restaurants in town where no one on their team is wearing a mask. It is, as Sherri said, this is not just about an individual. The ramifications of this on others is absolutely huge. If somebody could just stop for a moment and think, if we would get a case in our long-term care, that's considered an outbreak and we would have to shut down visitation. Do they really want someone's grandmother not visited? Besides the impact of this disease on those that are not vaccinated, the horrible impacts on this. Dr. Nevin has seen just things he probably never expected he would see in his career in terms of young people leaving young families. I mean, this is not over. And so I have trouble seeing when it's going to be in terms of masking, especially if we're not going to get a greater percent of the population vaccinated.
Sure.
I would really agree with you, Barb and Sherri. And, we've seen in our pediatricians last year, their visits dropped by almost 50%. Now, some of that may have been because people were afraid to go out, but the reality is they saw less strep throat, they saw less otitis media, they saw less respiratory infections because their kids were wearing masks. Now, one thing, and Sherri's here, I wanted to say real quickly, is that there was, again, this scuttlebutt, social media things that masking was somehow going to, prevent good socialization skills and awareness for, our youngest kids that depend on facial cues for their development. Studies have shown now that kids now are even more astute in looking at the smize in the eyes and seeing those subtle expressions that, are made by a wrinkled forehead. And there has not been a developmental delay in not having, seeing the bottom portion of a person's face or a parent's face. Take that with half the world where, Muslim women and others are wearing masks out in public all the time. And they're developing quite well. So I think masks are with us. I know my last year was the healthiest I've ever had. And so I'm going to be wearing a mask when I'm in tight social areas, and I tend to keep my space too.
Me too.
So going to that question, there's been a lot of people that have said, so if we get the vaccine, why do we still need to be masked?
Well, the vaccine is preparing your body for an assault by a virus. So your body is geared up and it's ready. Now, some people may not have as many little warrior antibodies in their system as others. And so they may still be a little susceptible. Vaccines prevent serious infection that lead to hospitalization, that leads to death. 99% of our people that are in the hospital right now and have COVID are not vaccinated. We have had some that are vaccinated. Some have even died, but typically they've had chronic illness, diabetes, heart disease, COPD, kidney disease, massively overweight. Those are contributing factors to that mortality.
Another question. We had a question roll in on our second pres comment section here. There's one person who asked a question. If you could discuss, there's been a recent study about natural immunity versus vaccination immunity. Can you say anything to that?
Sure. If my hand is the virus coming in, your body may pick and say, okay, I'm going to get that ring finger and get antibodies to that virus that looks like that. Whereas, and it's also got a spike on it, if I'm showing my finger, that maybe it doesn't, identify. The vaccines help identify that spike, which causes the virulence once the person is infected. Sometimes your natural immunity may get the spike, but it may get any other little things around that virus particle and build to that. And, it gives you good protection, but better protection comes with the vaccination and your own antibodies. The risk of not getting vaccinated is that having COVID is more likely to kill you, to cause permanent damage to your kidneys, permanent damage to your heart. We're seeing congestive heart failure in young people, months after they've been infected. We're seeing neurologic fog type symptoms where people are showing little micro infarcts because they developed so many little micro blood clots from COVID. And, it's a 10 times greater risk of developing those blood clots with COVID than with any vaccination you might get.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Nevin. Going back to Sherri, how can we help our students?
I would say one of the best things that we can do for our students is definitely support them. Our kids want to be back in school with their friends. And so, as parents and grandparents and all the loved ones we know who are raising our students, supporting the schools in whatever way that you can possibly do is going to carry a lot of weight. Our teachers, as a previous building principal, I knew, my responsibility was to take care of our teachers because our teachers were the ones who were taking care of the kids. And so doing whatever I could to support them, I felt personally responsible for. And teachers are individuals just like anybody else. I know sometimes with students and families, it's weird when you see them in a setting outside of the school because that's the only place, you associate with them, but they're people too. And so they're struggling personally and professionally right now because never has there been a time period in my 25 years working with District 87 where I feel like educators have been under such attacks. I mean, and just very vocal, like it's just perfectly acceptable to do that, when really they're in this profession. We're all in this profession because we love kids. We love our students and what we do to help educate them to become better citizens, to become lifelong learners. And so for me, it's really about what we can do to help our kids is help our educators. This is a really challenging time. Again, as I said earlier, no one went to school for this. And so whatever way, whatever, whether it's, it's a note, it's an email, it's a, just even a thank you as I see you in the grocery store, that goes such a long way. I mean, that just kind of gives you the the thing that you may need to get through. Because like I said, it's amazing to me, just the personal attacks in a situation that, they didn't cause, but are trying to navigate and just figure out the best way to continue to do what we do to help successfully educate our students. So support the schools, support our teachers, let them know that you recognize how hard they are working in this challenging time to educate our kids. Last year when teachers were trying to teach students at home as well as in the classroom, I mean, you had educators who never, my husband personally is an educator. He teaches at Normal Community. And to tether him to the desk where he's got to teach, now in a Zoom setting, as well as teaching kids actually physically in the classroom with him. I mean, that is more challenging than you could ever imagine. And so I would just say anything that you can do to support our educators is going to carry a lot of weight, because ultimately that's what's going to help our kids.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. Barb, similar question to you. How can we help support our older population?
Let's talk about the community first. Because in places like Westminster, there's team members who, as in the schools, they're doing an amazing job. In the community, I think it's a time to check on people. It's a time to practice kindness, to noticing who's in your neighborhood, to passing on and giving support to the incredible resources in this community, like Faith in Action and Meals on Wheels. Sometimes it's helping someone navigate that technology piece and getting them the connections for that. It really is a foreign language to a lot of us as we entered this. When you talk about technology, well, can you imagine if, when I always joke that one of the worst things we did was call that thing we carry around a phone. It's actually a computer that can do phone calls because it keep wanting it to act like a phone, and that's not all it does. But it's helping people in that way. I think, Trey, what you're doing in terms of the church, to be able to really look at the health of a community and get good information out there, finding ways we can do it safely to connect with people. That's what they need. And then for the teams that are working within long-term care and the residents here, they've been remembered in so many ways by the community. Please, please, please wear your masks. It makes such a difference for our world. We all live in that world, and then come in here and care for those that are most vulnerable. And we are all vaccinated here and getting boosters. But still, these are people that have lots of other comorbid conditions, other physical issues that we don't want them to have even a vaccinated case. It makes a big, big difference. This industry has been maligned during this whole thing. When we talk about deaths that are reported, and that's so tragic, but then they connect them to, were they in a long-term care facility? Well, nobody's in a long-term care facility that's healthy, that's not has physical challenges. And just like the flu, would negatively impact those that are more vulnerable. So too has COVID. And so the more that we can lift up the team members, say a thank you to them for all the ways that they've kept this population safe, it makes a big difference even in our ability to recruit.
Thank you. That's great, Barb. So, Dr. Nevin, going back to you, how can we help? I want to say the world. That seems a little big right now. But how can we help in Bloomington Normal? Let's start there.
Well, I think we trust our educators as leaders that have the best intentions for their students to learn and be ready to take on the world and as they grow up. I think that being vaccinated helps all of us because it does prevent the disease from spreading, because when it spreads, it gets a better chance to mutate and cause something worse. And then you look at the trickle-down effect of that. When we have patients that are in the hospital with COVID, that prevents other people from maybe coming to the hospital because we don't have the space or capacity in an ICU. So then you have people delaying things such as colonoscopy, mammograms. There were 50% less diagnosed breast cancers last year. Well, where are they? What's happening to them? Colon cancers coming to the hospital in advanced stages. A lot of those things are happening because we have to kind of shut down some of those elective procedures that we've done because we're clogged up taking care of people with COVID. And the consequences, once they're there, it's hard to get them placed. We can't place them as easily as we used to, in Barb's place. They have to be so careful on who they can accept, what standards, how long they're uninfected, and all those things are huge. And then you look at I think Barb talked about it earlier, some of that social isolation, the stress, depression. And that's where I think, Trey, you come in, where that spiritual healing is so important. And for me, it comes down to, again, who are you going to trust? Who are you going to trust? This is a real disease. It is not a political football.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Nevin. Sorry, I was on mute for a second. You talk about the spiritual needs. That's one of the opportunities we had here at Second Pres with doing new things and trying new ministry like Parking Lot Church. I really do think that as a world, we need to be able to find hope. And there's a lot of misinformation out there that is trying to keep people away from that hope for whatever reasons. There's 10,000 different reasons. And I'm hoping, using hope in it, I'm hoping that panels like this can allow people to get good information, solid information, so that they can see there is a hope. And, just how we first started, how are we doing? The first thing that I heard, from Barb was people are coming together. People are working in community. People are trying their best to be able to see the next day. Paraphrasing a little bit. But I think that is what will come out of, I hope that's what will come out of pandemic, is that people did come together and be the world that we need to be. I'm looking down. I don't see any other questions here in the comments. I'm going to give a couple minutes. If anybody has a question and you're in one of the small groups around, or if you're viewing this right now on YouTube, feel free to write that question down. And if we see it in time and feel we haven't already answered it, we'll go ahead and try to take care of that. But while we're doing that, I just want to give y'all the floor for a moment. Is there anything particular that you feel we may have missed here that needs to be said in a time such as this?
I think, Trey, what you said about hope is really, really important. And I think we do need to recognize where we are versus where we were. I know that no one in this industry will forget March 13th of last year, which is the day the world shut down for us. And as Sherri said, little did we know what was coming. But at that time, we were terribly unprepared. So at this point, we have adequate protective equipment. We have adequate testing. Praise the Lord, we have a vaccine. We have vaccines. And now the upcoming ability to provide boosters on all of those. There's reasons to be hopeful. Absolutely. And one of the critical steps, I think, when we get on the other side of this is to collectively say, how are we prepared for this if it would happen again? And instead of looking at individual institutions, how are we as a community in being prepared for such emergencies? And even as we do planning for disasters, well, this was certainly a disaster. And so I think there's a lot of smart people that'll put their heads together to say, okay, how could we keep this from impacting us to the extent that it has?
Barb, you hit on two of the same things I was thinking as well. I mean, March 13th, we'll never forget. And in education, you're always aware of things like Friday the 13th, because oddly enough, I mean, students sense those things. There's always a shift on special days, whether it's Friday the 13th or Halloween, or, we're always very cognizant of that in the school settings because it does impact our kids. And that will definitely be a Friday the 13th that none of us will ever forget, because it was just unlike anything that we ever expected. And, just even preparing for school that next year and touring the schools and seeing our elementary buildings where there were still even, decorations from March and St. Patrick's Day still hung up in classrooms because, things just turned on a dime. I mean, that's just something we're not ever going to soon forget. But even with that, I feel like there is definitely a sense of hope. I have said oftentimes that it is my hope that we all come out on the other side of this, better, smarter, thoughtful, wiser. Unfortunately, there was starting to be a trend in education with how individuals were treated and, some of the perceptions that were out there. And, my hope was that if we can come back on the other side of this and maybe treating those in education a little bit differently, a little bit more like the trusted individuals that I feel very strongly that educators are, if we can come out on the other side of this with greater value for our educators, then this wouldn't all be for nothing. And so that is certainly my hope as we move forward.
The other thing that I would say, and Barb touched on it, this is a worldwide, all-inclusive pandemic. It is not just a medical entity that we're trying to control. It's affecting our supply chain. It's affecting the employment scenario. It's huge. And when we look at the rest of the world, and especially those poorer nations, that less than 2% of their population is vaccinated, that is a risk for spreading more disease as we go forward. And I'm very concerned that there has been a division that is very difficult to adjust to. This is real. The impact is huge. When somebody gets sick, that means somebody else has to step in and take care of the job that they would have been doing, and getting childcare. Who takes care of the children? They can't, all those things. It's a trickle down, and it's massive when you look at that impact that this is having. And we have to be united and start, pulling for each other, because my choice has an effect on someone else's well-being.
Yeah. Thank you. All three of you. Thank you so much. We're going to cut it a little short today because we were hoping to have two other guests. I'll speak to that real quick. We were hoping that Mayor Coos could be with us from Normal, and unfortunately he had a family thing. And we were also hoping that Dr. Arnold, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, could be with us. But unfortunately he had something that kept him out as well. But I'm very thankful that the three of y'all are here with us today. I think y'all brought great wisdom. Yes, sir.
I was just going to share, since Mayor Coos isn't here, I sat on the Normal Advisory Council for COVID. And one of the things he did as not only as a community governmental leader, but as a business leader, he told his employees, and he didn't have to, he told them, if you want to have a job here next year, you have to be vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, don't even show up. And so I think that bold leadership is important because, in the industry, we've seen whole industries shut down because of people not being vaccinated, getting other people sick. And so like one cog gets broken down and you can't process everything that you need to. If you need 13 pieces for doing what you produce and one isn't produced, guess what? You have nothing. Even though you've got 12 of those 13 pieces, you're missing that one because somebody was sick, they couldn't do their job, they didn't show up, and they got 4 other people infected. It's huge. So I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Chris Coos for saying, get vaccinated or don't show up for work. I think that's bold, and that's the type of leadership we need. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate having all three of y'all here today. I know that your jobs have been very rough over the last year and a half, going on 2 years here soon. But we do appreciate the work you do. We appreciate your time here. And I hope that we can join again sometime and on a better note for, another reason.
Well, thank you, and to your church for putting this together.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
Thanks, Trey. Great to talk with people that are, united to do the best for the people we care about.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, for more information, check out this website, covidnextsteps.com. Forward, feel free to reach out. But it was great seeing y'all, and see y'all soon.